So I'm Ben Montross. For those of you that have been getting the mailings and emails and all that stuff on the fun-filled rule, that's because of me. So you're welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for this. Is far more folks than I expected. This is great to see you all out for this. Real quick before I start, this if you aren't aware with our lingo and the stuff we use, this presentation is just riddled with acronyms. So if you're not sure of what I'm saying, you don't remember what I'm saying, we've got that chart on the wall. Hopefully you can all see it. The big things, the RT, RP, routine, repeat samples. A plus sign means a positive or a present sample, and negative is absent or negative sample. And the rest we'll just kind of figure it out as we go along. So, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the current TCR. So that's the rule that we're currently using until April 1st of next year. And I'm going to get into some of the transition into the RTCR. So as everybody's aware, public water systems are currently conducting sampling for total coliform under the total coliform rule. There's a variety of bacteria, parasites, viruses that can impact drinking water systems and make users sick. So instead of targeted testing for each of those specific things, EPA and all those folks high up decided, we're going to use total coliform. This is a good indicator because total coliform is a category of bacteria that shouldn't be in finished drinking water. So if we see it, it means something's going on and there may be some pathways through which other more harmful stuff can get into your water. So the presence of the coliform in drinking water suggests that there's a pathway for pathogens. The absence, therefore, of total coliforms in the distribution system minimizes the likelihood that pathogens and fecal contamination are present in the drinking water. So every 6 years, the EPA is required to reassess their primary drinking water standards and take a look at what they're doing and see, how's it working and how can we improve this. So they've decided the TCR has been successful in protecting against protecting public health and protecting against waterborne diseases. But they were wondering, what can we do? How can we ratchet this up? How can we, make things a little better? So they definitely saw some improvements to the initial rule, but that it had plateaued, and the violations were kind of steady, and they figured that pretty much the changes that were being captured and required to meet the requirements of the TCR were likely already achieved. So because of that, they asked the question, how can we achieve greater public health protection? And the answer is through the revised total coliform rule. So as we transition to this revised rule, the goal is to increase protection of public health by reducing sanitary defects, which allow fecal contamination and or other waterborne pathogens into a distribution system. And there's more, but it's just words. So basically, long and the short of it, sanitary defect is a defect that can provide a pathway of entry for microbial contamination into the distribution system, or that is indicative of a failure or imminent failure of a barrier that's already in place. So the RTCR seeks to reduce the number of violations that are experienced by improving the sanitary condition of the water system. So rather than issuing public notice and violations in letters and mail and take more samples, the RTCR uses total coliform presence as a trigger to identify and then correct sanitary defects in the system that can provide a pathway for contamination. So it really changes it from a paperwork thing and sampling thing to really get out there, why is this going on, and fix whatever you find. So I'm going to use several times in this presentation, find and fix, find and fix. So that's why. So under the revised total coliform rule, total coliforms will be used as an indicator of system integrity. So EPA has determined that total coliform in and of itself does not present a public health risk, an immediate public health risk, just by itself. So you're going to kind of cast this broad net looking for total coliform per chance that the pathogens, this is the stuff that makes you sick. If there's a chance that this is getting in, there's also a chance that that's getting in, and this is a lot easier and simpler to test for. So that's the idea. So under the revised total coliform rule, they've done away with the total coliform MCL, so maximum contaminant level. So that means if you have 2 or more positive samples in a month, you're not going to get a letter from us, you're not going to have to post public notice, and your users aren't going to go, I got this letter, I don't know what this means, it says I have bacteria in the water, but can I drink the water? Do I need to boil it? Am I going to be sick? All that is going to go away for the most part. So the idea is this is going to improve consumer confidence in the water system. You're not going to have these notices that are posted or hanging out on a website or on the wall that are expired or old and confusing. All that stuff goes away. No more will systems have to post public notice because their water contains total coliform. So, beginning April 1st of 2016, if total coliform is found, systems won't be issued an MCL violation. Instead, systems will need to assess the distribution systems and fix issues that could allow contamination. Total coliform positive suggests that something that poses a greater risk, so those pathogens, can get into the system. So as we transition to the rule, what stays the same is you're going to keep taking samples. That doesn't go away. You're still going to use total coliform and E. coli as indicators for contamination and fecal contamination. But the big change is this is that find and fix. That's one of the biggest things, and I'm going to get into that shortly. There's also more stringent requirements for systems that are currently on quarterly monitoring, transitioning into the new rule. So I'll get into that also where applicable. There's some of the monitoring schedules will be changing. And for those that are able to stay on quarterly monitoring, kind of ratcheted up the requirements to stay on quarterly monitoring. There's increased requirements for seasonal systems. So a seasonal system is defined as a TNC, so a transient non-community water system, that does not serve a public population year-round, but the system doesn't necessarily depressurize in its off-season. Basically, if you run a TNC that doesn't serve a public population for a calendar quarter, that can be considered a seasonal system. The EPA has determined that the nature of starting up, shutting down, and having water kind of hanging out in a storage tank or distribution pipes for a long time in an off-season creates a higher risk and a higher potential for contamination. So because of that, these systems will be required to sample on a monthly basis for the months in which they're open, and they'll have to complete a state-approved startup form. So I don't know how many TNC operators are in here or how many folks in here operate TNC systems. In the past, we've sent out recommended or suggested startup procedures. We've changed those a little bit, and now they're required. So for seasonal systems, you need to complete those the month when you open. And then another big shift, which is maybe just a paperwork thing to most folks, but it's a big requirement to make sure everybody's sampling and representing their distribution systems accurately, is the completion of bacteriological monitoring plans. So every system in the state needs to have a new plan. So new as of about October. So we've sent these out, we've emailed these out. Probably got multiple copies by now and you're sick and tired of seeing this, but we're probably going to keep poking you for them until we have them all, because we're going to have about 1,400 of these come in. Every system needs to have an approved monitoring plan using the new form. Chances are where you're currently sampling should work, so it's not necessarily you have to change your sites, you have to change the form, and you need to have some additional info on that new form. One change I'll state is that in your sampling locations before, depending when your plan was approved, we wanted people sampling at the ends of lines or like the ends of your system. Well, you'll see in a minute that's not really possible under the RTCR. We want you to sample closer in now, and I'll explain why. So be thinking about your current spots, if they're representative, and if they're at the ends of the line, you may want to move those in a bit. So, I've yet to get applause from this one. I don't know if you're going to applaud, but basically, effective April 1st, we will no longer be issuing a boil water notice based solely on total coliform results. There we go, somebody did it, I heard it. All right, my day is complete. So, because there's no more total coliform MCL, there really isn't a reason to boil water just because of total coliform. This rule has transitioned away from the total coliform posing a health risk and more towards a system integrity indicator, thing. So we didn't see fit to keep issuing boil water notices just on total coliform positives. I'll get into it more shortly, but we would still have a boil water notice for E. coli, and E. coli, confirmed E. coli, E. coli MCL, I'll define that. And then of course we're going to keep our precautionary boils. So if you have an E. coli positive routine and you can't get your samples within 24 hours for your repeats, we'll put you on a precautionary boil. And then also operational issues, line leaks, repairs, fixes, depressurization, bulk water holing if you can't carry a residual through the distribution, stuff like that. And then also following certain findings and events during site assessments. So this find and fix thing, revolves around these site assessments. So we'll get into that too, but if you find something that shouldn't be there, floating mice in your storage tank, we're gonna put you on boil. So we're still doing the operational stuff, but no longer will we put people on systems on boil because of total coliform positives. So, find and fix, right? A little bit of background for contaminated systems, and this was in, take a step back. I like to joke that the revised total coliform rule is 15 pages in length. I have three 3-inch binders of guidance on how to implement those 15 pages. So this is heavy. So one of those pieces of guidance that I saw, and it makes sense, I just never actually thought of it this way. In order for a distribution system to become contaminated, you need 3 things. You need a source of bacteria, you need a pathway into the distribution system or a breach in the system to get the bacteria in. And you need a mechanism that allows the bacteria to be carried in. So basically, you need the stuff, you need the fan, you need to have a way to get the stuff into the fan, right? So looking at this kind of in a visual way, you got a source of water, surface water, groundwater, some sort of runoff, something like that contaminated with E. coli, and you have a hole. Normal operations, right? Water's gonna go that way until something down here happens. A leak, flushing, some sort of maintenance, things like that, causing lower negative pressure. This contaminated water will then be brought into the system. So the RTCR requires systems to assess the pathways of contamination, tighten stuff up, fix holes, patch this, tighten that, that sort of thing. And it also, helps you try to look at and assess and reduce some of the mechanisms by which all this can happen. So the ultimate goal of the RTCR is to go from left to right in these pictures. You can see up here, wow, I'm shaking, huh? There's a spring box in the woods with a little plug type cover. Not ideal, rain, surface water, insects, small rodents, things like that can get into the system. Not ideal, not sanitary construction. What we want to see is it turned into this, and this is actually the same spring. This is after a survey, we found this situation. Operator went through, put another tile on, regraded the whole area, sealed the seams, put an overlocking, gasketed, waterproof hatch, lockable, the whole deal. So this is, unsanitary, and then that's more sanitary. One of the things we expect to see a lot of is, wells and well caps. So you've got some split conduits from, frost heaves, especially, we know after the last winter was not kind for most water system equipment. Frost heaves can pop off well caps, as you can see here. And then the problem is that, the frost isn't nice and doesn't take it back when it leaves. It's going to stay like that. And if it stays like that all summer, little creepy crawlies are going to get into your well. And if you're a small system without treatment, then that's into your system. So ultimately, we want to see a transition from, broken, cracked conduits to a nice sanitary, modern sanitary well cap. It also assesses breaches in storage tanks. So these 2 pictures right here, this one you can't see as well, but that's an access to a storage tank. So you open the hatch and you can see the probes for the level controls. That's just an open conduit. You can't really see it, but that's a rat's nest. And then this is just crumpled up, chewed up little leaf bits. So not ideal. Little stuff can get into your drinking water system and create havoc. This one, you're actually standing on top of the storage tank, and it's got holes for the pump. And it just so happens that the hole's this big, so you can pull the pumps to get the foot valve out. The pipe's that big, and around it is stuffed with t-shirts. So again, not really sanitary construction. So this is the same system, this one to this one. You can see a permanent sanitary conduit for which you can then have these little ferncos, whatever they're called there, so they can pull the pumps and things like that. That's what we want to see. We want to see it moving this way. This is the same tank as this one, where the operators did a great job putting in a watertight conduit, sealing the extra penetrations, making sure everything's watertight, and keeping the creepy crawlies out. So the EPA sees the benefits of the RTCR through this. So the logic is, at least initially, when systems get positives, there'll be an increase in site assessments. Systems will assess the pathways and fix the defects, which will result in a decrease then in future total coliform and E. coli positive over time, which then therefore means there's a decrease in public health risk. Through doing the assessments, and when you're out there doing the work more, it'll also increase operator knowledge of system operations. So instead of, I think that pipe's over there. Maybe in 2 or 3 years, you'll know where that pipe is because you'll have to fix it, or things will happen that are going to make you examine your system more. It's going to lead to better system performance over time, which is a good thing. And then for us, kind of selfishly, certain violations under the TCR will become triggers under the RTCR. So instead of just mailing out letters, we're going to make systems go out and do stuff. So we see that as a big benefit. So the find and fix portion, right? So like the TCR, the revised total coliform rule requires routine and repeat sampling. Things change a little bit, I'll get into the specifics. But basically just think, if you take a routine and there's a positive, you will be taking repeats. So if 2 or more samples in a month are total coliform positive, it indicates that the system may be vulnerable to contamination. Because the system is vulnerable to contamination, the system needs to go out and conduct an assessment to determine what the sanitary defects are that could be causing the contamination and allowing it to get into the system. That said, a lot of pipes and a lot of infrastructure is in the ground and you can't see a leak necessarily unless it's surfacing. So if there's no defects found, physical defects found in the system, the rule also makes the operators or the samplers review their sampling protocol, because maybe you're selecting bad sites, maybe you're taking samples wrong. Maybe when you take the lid off the bottle, you put it in your pocket or you put it in your mouth and then you take the sample. Stuff like that. We had an issue this summer where an operator took a sample, put the lid on the fence post, which happened to be covered in bird droppings, take a sample and then get E. coli. Not a real shock, but this is going to help reduce those false positives, if you want to call them a false positive. So there's 2 different types of site assessments under the rule. There's a level 1 and a level 2. Level 1 happens if there's 2 or more total coliform samples in a month, or if a system fails to take every repeat sample following a total coliform routine positive sample. So basically, if it's demonstrated that your system is having issues, or if your system may have an issue but we don't know how widespread because you didn't do your repeats, that'll be a level 1 site assessment. A level 2 site assessment, ratchet it up a little bit. E. coli MCL, or if you have a second level 1 trigger in 12 months. So repeated issues or very serious issues. So we're going to start with level 1s. So again, level 1s happen when there's 2 or more total coliform samples in a month, or if the system fails to take every required repeat sample following a total coliform routine sample. This results in level 1, which needs to be performed, done, and the form submitted to us within 30 days of the trigger. Level 1 site assessments are intended to be like a self-check, right? So they can be performed by any validly certified drinking water system operator with the same class of the system or greater. So really, the systems operator should and could do it. If the systems operator's on vacation, you got somebody kind of filling in, or somebody that's available, or health reasons, whatever. Somebody else can swoop in and help, so long as they're the same class or greater. So by that I mean, if it's a level 2 system and you're a level 2 operator, you can do it. If it's a level 3 system and you're a level 2 operator, you can't, right? So level 4 operators can do assessments at 3, 2, and then 1 systems. Level 2 operators can just do level 2, or class 2, I'm sorry. One thing to note is that the assessment needs to be done by the person doing the assessment must hold the license, the proper class license of the system. You can't just work for somebody or be sent out by somebody. The person doing the assessment needs to have the validly certified license of the same class or greater. As a selfish self-promotion here, we will be providing trainings on how to perform a level 1 site assessment in January with our work through Rural Water Association. So we're going to start doing the roadshow around the state with how to do a level 1 site assessment. We're also working on a YouTube video. I don't know all of you that saw my pretty face in YouTube. All 203 of you, I think, as of this morning, but I'm not counting. And I swear only half are my mom. We're going to have another level 1 site, or how to perform a level 1 site assessment video. We just wrapped up filming this morning, actually. So look on our website, look at Rural Water's schedule, look on our YouTube channel. We're really trying to have as much info out there as we can. So this is just a little taste of the level 1 form. Level 1 is just really checking for unusual events, changes in maintenance, conditions of the source water, existing water quality, inadequacies in the sampling site, and then system integrity. So it starts with changes or events. So you sample the south side of town, you've always sampled the south side of town. And then all of a sudden, the dairy that's on the south side of town closes up, you've got a 10-inch main going to nowhere. probably not the best place to take a sample because you know you're not going to have the water use out there and the water age and all that sort of stuff. So that sort of stuff can change in the system as things go on. Sampling protocol, you know, it talks about sample sites, sample taps. You didn't rinse your bottle, you did rinse your bottle out to get rid of all that powder and all that crap because you didn't want that to contaminate the sample. You laugh, it happens. That stuff's supposed to stay in there. You know, stuff like that. Just really assessing the whole process of how you did your sample and trying to tighten down on operators' understanding of how to take a good sample in a really good sanitary condition. And then it marches through your system. So you start at the source, follow the flow of water throughout, and just circle. You know, you can't really see it right now. I can't see it right now very well. But yeses and no questions. And then for anything you answer yes, you need to say what happened, what was going on. It gives you a chance here to say the date and how you fixed it. So you can say, look, our well cap cracked. We have no idea what happened. We looked in, it's covered, you know, it's just full of earwigs. Okay, so you say, well cap, no. Freudian slip. Well cap cracked. Fix the well cap on this date, shock the system. Great, probably all you need to do. That sounds good. If it's something that's going to take more time, you know, the requirement is 30 days, but fixing the south end of town because it's riddled with holes and you keep chasing leaks down the line could take more than 30 days. We understand that, we realize that. If you have a storage tank and the access hatch is blown and you need to have somebody, you know, custom pour you a new riser and lid, we understand that could take a few months. So that's where you propose to us here, look, this is the issue, this is how we've been able to temporarily kind of cover it or fix it for now. We've got this on order or this planned. We need until a certain date, and you need to give us a date. But if you propose us a date and we understand what the situation is and we think it's agreeable, we will allow you to move that date out. We'll give you more than those 30 days. So after triggering the assessment and performing everything, so that's the find, here's the fix. So the fix is, within 30 days, you correct the defects, complete the form, and submit the completed form back to us. All sanitary defects found need to be corrected. So you may think, I'm going to put it to the state, I'm just going to circle one thing because I know I've got issues over here, I'm not going to acknowledge them. You're only shooting yourself in the foot because when you get your next positive, and it's really maybe not if but when type thing, when you get contaminated again, you're going to need to then do a level 2 assessment, which is much more stringent and done by either the state or a party approved by the state, and you didn't report that stuff, doesn't really bode well for the system. Identify all defects, walk through the entire system, don't just stop at the first thing. Complete all issues and all defects in the system. And again, if you need more time, we understand that. We understand you're not going to inspect your tank in the middle of February if you bring divers in, you know, stuff like that, like realistic extensions are fine. We'll ultimately determine if the assessments and schedules are sufficient. So give us as much information as you can. And then if we agree upon an extended schedule, make sure you keep us in the loop. Don't just let things like, oh yeah, I fixed it, but I never tell the state. We're gonna be tracking this stuff in our database and we're gonna be doing much tighter compliance follow-up. Send us letters, send us bills, reports, pictures, anything you can to substantiate the work that you've been doing. So I'll say this quickly, that duct tape and bubble gum is not a permanent fix. You can't do that in this sort of situation. The fixes need to be permanent or made permanent under a schedule. They need to follow industry best management practices, and they need to meet the requirements of the water supply rule. So really briefly, level 2 site assessments. So they're triggered by a more significant event, therefore it's a more complete inspection. I don't have a sample of the form, it's 7 or 8 pages at this point, it's pretty heavy. It's going to be done by division staff or a contractor or a series of contractors. We're working on setting that all up. But at least initially, level 2 site assessments will be performed and essentially paid for by the state. So when they're triggered, you won't have to worry about the cost or the going to training and all that sort of stuff. We're going to handle that for a while. Level 2 site assessment is triggered by an E. coli MCL. So anytime you have a routine total coliform positive followed by an E. coli positive repeat, or an E. coli positive routine followed by a total coliform or E. coli repeat, if you have an E. coli positive sample and you don't take your repeats, you don't take all of your repeats, that's a level 2 trigger. Similar to the level 1 trigger, if you have E. coli but you don't do enough of your repeats, we don't know how extensive the problem is, That's a level 2 site assessment. And then this won't be the case very much in Vermont, but if you have an E. coli positive routine and a total coliform positive repeat, and E. coli is not analyzed, it's usually not applicable in Vermont. Most of the labs are really good about checking for E. coli too. That would trigger level 2. Level 2 site assessment needs to be performed within 30 days of the trigger. It's a more in-depth, more developed process. So like I said, performed by the state or parties approved by the state. Just the who, what, where, when, why, all that sort of stuff for the assessments. The big things are kind of blurry, which is awesome. The who and the when. So the level 1s are certified operators, same class of the system or greater. Level 2s are the state or party approved by the state. When, they're both within 30 days of the triggers. So for level 1, after the second total coliform positive in a month, or after failing to take all the repeat samples for level 1 site assessment. And for level 2, it's within 30 days of triggering the second level 1 assessment within 12 months, or within 30 days of the E. coli MCL. And ultimately, the why is protection of public health. Now we're going to get into monitoring. So this is the chart, which is truncated for Vermont. We don't have any folks bigger than that, but this is the number of samples to be taken per monitoring period, which does not change under the RTCR. So if you're under 1,000, you'll be taking 1 sample per monitoring period. Monitoring periods may change for your system, which I'll get into. If you're under 1,000 non-community groundwater type of system, you may have eligibility to sample quarterly versus monthly. If you're over 1,000, regardless of the type, source waters, class, whatever, those systems will all be on monthly sampling. So, routine sampling frequencies for all surface water or groundwater under the direct influence will be monthly. Hasn't changed, that's the same as the TCR. Community water systems, monthly. Hasn't changed, same as the TCR. Non-community, so NTNC and TNC, on groundwater, over 1,000 in population, will sample monthly, same as the TCR. Here's when it changes a little bit. So as I said, the seasonal systems are potentially more vulnerable to contamination. Therefore, seasonal TNCs will be required to sample monthly. And then, and this is the tricky part, and stay with me, year-round, non-community, groundwater systems, 1,000 and under in population, can sample quarterly until a series of events happen. So that colorful flow chart, so I left some handouts on your tables. Feel free to grab them and take them if you want them. If not, just leave them there. We'll gather them at the end. The colorful looking flowchart thing is this process in visual form to try to understand when systems we need to be potentially quarterly versus monthly and bouncing back and forth. Ultimately, we see quarterly monitoring as a reward for good system upkeep and good sample taking and all that sort of thing. There's several states, we think now probably over 20 states in the country that are just mandating monthly monitoring, all systems, no questions asked, including Massachusetts is one of them. We didn't want to go that far. We have to have seasonal systems on monthly based on the requirements of the rule, but the non-community under 1,000 groundwater systems will have the option and the ability to sample quarterly until one of several things happen. So, this is schools, factories, offices, business parks, things like that. All those year-round systems, if they're under 1,000, can sample quarterly until any one of those 4 things on the left happen. So a level 2 trigger, right? Repeated issues or an E. coli MCL violation. An E. coli MCL violation. This is new so far, the total coliform treatment technique violation. So that means you triggered an assessment, but you didn't conduct the assessment within 30 days, or you triggered an assessment and you didn't make the corrections within 30 days. If you do that, again, you've got some issues. We don't know that they're fixed. We don't know how they're fixed. That's going to trigger monthly monitoring. And then if there's 2 monitoring violations, meaning failing to take a routine sample, or a level 1 site assessment and a monitoring violation within a 12-month period, the system will have to then sample monthly. Once a non-community groundwater under 1,000 open year-round system triggers monthly monitoring, it will be at monthly monitoring for at least 12 months. And then in order to go back to quarterly monitoring, you need to fix the issue or resolve the issue that triggered the increased monitoring. So fix, whatever happened over here, return to compliance for whatever that thing was. And then both have a sanitary survey or a voluntary level 2 site assessment within the last 12 months, be free of sanitary defects, and have a protected source that meets construction standards. So the protected source means an up-to-date source protection plan update, a permitted source, you're not using an emergency source or something kind of sketchy, and you don't have any source-related defects or deficiencies. So you're not using a well without a cap, stuff like that. And then also, you need to have a clean RTCR compliance history for the last 12 months, so that's the 12-month piece. A clean compliance history means no E. coli MCL violations, no monitoring violations, no TT triggers, and no TT violations. Basically, the long and the short of this is, you need to have a clean bill of health, and you need to have a clean compliance history for 12 months, at which point we will entertain the idea of bumping systems back to quarterly. We will not be automatically changing systems from quarterly. We will definitely be moving systems from quarterly to monthly. We will not be moving you back from monthly to quarterly. That's going to be up to the system to talk to us about. This rule is going to be pretty labor intensive for the division. So once you feel that your system is eligible to bounce back to quarterly monitoring, present that to us. You can't change on your own. You can only change when directed by us. So make sure you have our approval. You can't change without our prior approval. I'll point out here, this is very deliberate that it says a voluntary level 2 site assessment. We're working out the details of what that means. We've got a little bit of time. This is one of those details. The rule goes into effect in April. We still need to figure out a few of the details. That's one of the details, but we'll have at least a year after April 1st of 2016 to figure that all out. We will not be changing our survey schedules. We have really rigid survey schedules, especially for NTNCs and community systems. 2.5 to 3 years, without question, we're doing surveys. The TNCs is every 5 years. So we're not going to alter that schedule because it's like, hey, look, I'm ready. All I need is a survey. Come see me a 1.5 years early. Nope. We're sticking to our schedule. So that means those systems, if they want to go from monthly to quarterly, will need to have a voluntary level 2. Like I said, we'll have more on that. So now getting into repeat sampling. So like I said, you just talked about the routine sampling, monthly, quarterly, that whole thing. Now we get into the repeat sampling aspect of this rule. Every water system will be required to take 3 repeat samples for each total coliform positive sample. That means if you're a big system, you take 5 samples a month, 3 of them come back positive, you're taking 3 repeats on each routine positive. So it's not just a set of repeats and you're done. You're taking 3 repeats for each positive. Those repeats are taken at the same location as the positive, a location within 5 connections downstream, further from the source or further from storage or down the flow of water, and within 5 connections upstream, so closer to the source, upstream, up the flow of water.